Now I'm ready to go. Hi, my name is Will Flannigan. I'm a realtor with Equity Union and the Nell team. I'm here today with Chris Hendricks. He is an attorney with Fox Law, and they specialize in fire litigation. And I wanted to talk to Chris today to kind of get an update on what's happening with the fire victims and the litigation that's happening around the Altadena fire. So, Chris, can you give us an update? Can you kind of fill people in? Give us a little bit of your background and where they are in the litigation.
Sure. Yeah, and thanks for having me here. I'm with Fox Law. We represent a number of clients in a number of fires. We've done about, I think this will be our 26th wildfire that we've worked over the past decade or so. We've been doing wildfire for a very long time. And with the Eaton fire specifically, just so everyone's aware, it's 9 to 10,000 structures, nearly 20 deaths, tens of billions of dollars in damage. And in terms of the liability case against SCE, where our primary theories of liability are now is this has to do with a failure to maintain equipment. There were power lines running there called idle or zombie power lines that had been taken out of service in, I believe it was 1971. And
Wow.
this is where we saw that arcing event, the sparks coming down from the gas station video that probably everybody has seen now. That was a decommissioned power line that still held the charge on the night of the fire. So it's a failure to maintain case, similar to other cases like, let's say, the campfire Paradise a few years back. That was again another failure to maintain equipment, and that time it was a hook that had failed, causing the power line to fall. But not too dissimilar from a case like that. And they also failed to de-energize their lines during what we all know is a very high wind event, and during a very dangerous time that the Palisades fire had started, just very shortly before this one started. So taking you into where we are in the litigation, the bellwether pools have been established for the most part now. That's going to be about 50 or so cases that will be selected in the coming weeks this spring. The pool from where those are going to be selected from has already been established. Trial dates will be January 25th, 2027 is when the first trials are set. And so far, we're thankful the court has rejected attempts to extend that trial date out. And so what this all means for everybody is we think if the court maintains this trial date and we keep pushing forward, that there's going to be serious attempts to resolve these cases coming into the middle to latter half of 2026 to avoid that trial date. So that's where we think we are in terms of the global litigation today.
So typically, I mean, you mentioned the term bellwether, or that's the kind of the lead horse, right? They're going to tackle those plaintiffs initially and kind of set the bar for the rest of the litigation. Is that correct? Is that how this works typically?
Yeah, so these are supposed to be certain representative cases that have been worked up sufficiently to where they can be set for trial. So there was a pool that was established for the bellwethers that you had to meet certain markers for, both in terms of the type of case, but also in terms of the discovery and the information that SCE wants has been provided to them. So we had to check a bunch of boxes. Once you're in that pool, then there's going to be a number of cases, a few dozen cases selected from that pool. And then that sets the tone. They're the ones who get the first trial dates. And if they do go to trial, which I don't know if it's going to happen here, but if they do go to trial, it sets the tone for resolutions across the board. Then there will be the idea is a benchmark from which SC and the plaintiffs can sit there and say, these are about what these cases are worth. Now, we think we have a good idea of what that is already, but that's the reason why there's a bellwether case or bellwether cases.
So have you begun the process of doing depositions and all that? I mean, are you into discovery with regard to, damages and other issues? How far?
Yes, absolutely. Depositions have been taking place for some time now.
Okay. And so you've been deposing the Edison people and other parties that would be potentially liable?
And on the other side too, plaintiffs have been deposed as well.
Got it. Got it. Well, so in terms of the past litigation that you've been involved in, how does this one shake out in terms of, this is in my mind like the biggest one that's happened in a major urban setting, right? you had so many people, thousands of people impacted, thousands of structures and homes lost, right on the edge of a major urban center. How does this compare to some of the other fires that you've worked on?
You know, we have had other major ones in LA like Woolsey, and then Thomas to a different extent in Ventura. But this is a very significant fire. It's 10,000 structures basically. That's a lot. And when you say nearly urban setting, this is more urban than Malibu. It's more urban than Ventura. It's certainly more urban than the far north of California. So it is different in that sense. The population density was very high in Altadena and Pasadena. So it's had a significant impact on people and on the community.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of the timeline, you said that you're coming up for setting trial dates later this year, right?
Trial date set for January 25th of
January
next year.
25th. So that's kind of the hard deadline. They don't want to go to trial, I imagine, because trials are very expensive and very unpredictable, right? I mean,
Yeah, so that would be my read on this situation is that I would think that more earnest settlement negotiations will happen in the latter part of this year once that trial date starts getting close.
right. And you're pushing back on their attempts to try to delay it because obviously, these people have been out of their home for going on 2 years, it'll be by then. That's a long time to get justice for damages that were caused by somebody else's negligence.
Of
Um,
course, and in our, while we are still working on the case, our investigation is we feel confident in the findings so far that this points to liability against the SCE. We do like our case, and we're ready to try the case if needed. That's certainly the case as well.
right. Now, most of the people you're representing, I'm assuming they have total loss, right? They're completely, their house is burned. They have nothing left. Everything they owned was taken. Am I correct in that assumption?
Yes, yeah. So total loss homeowners. We also do represent a number of the families of individuals who are deceased in the fire. So not all of them are obviously total loss homeowners. Some of them are renters, but they're equally or very significantly tragic cases.
So it seems to me though, it's going to be really like, how does a company like SCE manage so many hundreds or thousands of negotiations for individual loss? And how does that play out? I mean, I may have lost my home and my neighbor may have lost their home, but we were talking before this started. I have a client who's a, world-renowned origami artist, and, he lost everything. And obviously it's not replaceable. His losses are going to be different from somebody who, was just a regular homeowner that didn't use their home as a place of work. How does the negotiation or the settlement talks happen with specific owners with each having different loss? And how does that timeline go out? Because I can't imagine, they're not going to do it in one fell swoop. It's kind of individual. So it might take months or years, right?
Well, starting with the original question, there's a difference between a class action and a mass tort.
Of
And the
course.
distinction there is exactly what you're hitting on is where a class action, the liability is the same and the damages for the better part are the same. The way we always say is think of the iPhone battery cases where these things just wouldn't hold battery after a year or two. Everyone has the same damages of their phone not working. These cases, wildfire cases, are the opposite because by law, property is considered unique. And what it costs to rebuild your house is a different number than what it costs to rebuild your neighbor's house. So that is all considered, and every client that we have gets an individual workup on specifically what would it take to replace the home that was lost in the fire.
Right. And to recap, we had talked, I don't know, maybe 6 months or 9 months ago. For those people that didn't see that conversation, kind of talk again about, because there's a lot of people that I've talked to that have no idea that this is how the litigation is impacting potential sales of lots. So if you could talk a little bit about the difference between listing or selling your burned out lot versus holding out to rebuild your home, how does that impact the value of a settlement?
Significantly. So what you're talking about there is there's two measures of damages that can be had here. And one is diminution in value. What's the property worth the day before the fire? What's it worth the day after the fire? And that's your diminution in value. So obviously, let's just say a house is worth $1 million the day before, and then afterwards there's nothing there, but the lot is still worth $500,000. There's $500,000 in damages. That is the damage that you get if you do not have what's called a genuine intent to restore the property. If you have a genuine intent to restore, i.e., rebuild the property, then you can have what does it cost to replace what you lost the day before the fire? So, what does it cost to get that home back to as close to that condition as you can in today's dollars? And that is a much larger number if you can envision. Now you're starting from zero. The price per square foot is what it is right now. Materials are expensive, workers are expensive, but they are required if you have a genuine intent to restore the property to replace it. And so you can build again. And that's a different number. And it's almost inevitably a much higher number, significantly so.
Of course, the value of a burned out lot at 500,000 is a lot different than the value of a brand new constructed 4-bedroom, 3-bath home. Obviously, that
Correct.
would be a much greater value. How do they determine the genuine intent to restore? What is there a test, or do they take a deposition of somebody and make them prove if they've taken actions to show that?
Yeah, so there's a lot of ways to show it. I mean, there's obviously ways you could show it as having building permits, having construction started. These are all ways of showing it. But the reality is, for a lot of people here, is they've lost everything or nearly everything, and they don't have the money, whether through their insurance, maybe they were uninsured, maybe they had fair plan, or some insurance that just wasn't enough to cover. And for those people, it doesn't make sense to start construction. So a lot of it's just based on what they say and what they're saying their intentions are.
Got it.
Uh, Ways you can defeat that intent, though, listing your property for sale, listing that lot for sale can count against you. So it's just something that everyone should consider before listing a lot that was lost in the property is, do they want to pursue restoration at some point in the future? And if so, it can impact any resolution from these cases.
Yeah, and I've had these conversations, and I've sold a lot. I sold a lot for clients who they just made the calculation that, they were both in their 80s, and, the time and energy and effort it would take to, get the house restored, they just said, we're not going to wait around for the 2, 3, 4, 5 years. We want to get on with our life. We'll settle for whatever the value of the lot is and sell the lot and just, move on. And they did that, and they moved out of the area. But there are other people who I know are holding on and do have an intent to rebuild. And then there's another pool of people who may or may not have an intent. They're just not sure right now. I think there's a lot of post-traumatic stress issues that are going to arise. So somebody may say, I intend to do this, but when push comes to shove, my gut tells me a lot of those people are going to back out. And eventually, after the settlement, they're going to recalculate and potentially sell that lot. And, we talked about this earlier. My feeling is if it's 10% or 30%, some number of those people who did have an intent to rebuild after the settlement, after they received their funds from SCE, whatever that amount is, I think a lot of those people are going to eventually sell that burned out lot. And when they do that, I think that's going to impact the valuation of those lots that are for sale. And I think it's going to open up a lot of opportunities for developers who are going to buy bulk lots. They're going to buy 4, 5, 10 lots at the same time, because construction costs being what they are, if you can rebuild, 10 homes at the same time, it makes managing the construction costs a lot more easy to deal with. It's almost like you've got a new development in process, right? Can you talk a little bit about what you've seen in the past with other fires that have had this happen? And if you've seen that kind of same situation, do people tend to actually go through with it and rebuild, or what percentage of people actually change their mind after the settlement comes down?
I think most people that I've seen have had genuine intent to restore their property. It's not every case, but it's the majority of them that I've seen. Altadena specifically has had a lot of that sentiment. There's a lot of pride in the community, and it's just awesome to see that so many people are saying we're not leaving. This is our area. This is a place that we're going to rebuild. We're not selling to developers, and that's the vast majority. And the sentiment has been higher in Altadena than most places I've worked, if not than any other place that we've worked. So it's really heartening to see that they intend to stay as a part of the community. And there's a lot of pride in Altadena, which I'm sure you're well aware of.
Yeah.
In terms of the long term, there are a lot of rebuilding's not easy. It's not easy, especially when you need to rebuild 9 to 10,000 structures, and that's what Altadena is facing. There's limited contractors, there's limited architects, so a lot of work needs to be done. So it doesn't happen overnight. It takes years and years. I think one of the stats that was outstanding from the Woolsey fire was that after about 5 years, they were still about 50% rebuild, which is significant. You know, people are still trying to rebuild after 5 years. So it's not something that happens overnight. And you're just starting to see the first structures from Altadena get rebuilt. And those are the people that were on it virtually day one. So there's going to be a long line after that, and figure that average rebuilds, you know, at least 2 years for a lot of these. It's going to take a while. And especially the people that need the funds from this case or from insurance or whatever's going on to rebuild, you can't even start the clock until they get that money. So it's going to be a while. It's going to be a long road. And there's certainly going to be people like you're talking about that may choose ultimately not to rebuild.
Yeah.
But I am heartened by the fact that most people that I've spoken with, and we do represent a large number of people up there, they really do want to rebuild, and they want to rebuild their community, and they want to stay a part of it.
Yeah, and I was mentioning to you before the recording started, I have a client who lost 3 properties in Altadena. They absolutely love Altadena. They're rebuilding all 3 with the intention to sell one of them that they were going to sell prior to the fire. And they have the resources to be able to begin that process. So they already have permits and plans and architects for all 3. And the first one, which is the one they're going to move into, they're actually framing is done, foundation is complete, inspections are done. They're on to plumbing and electrical, and windows are going in, I think, this week or next week. So they're moving along, and they expect to actually be her contractor told them they would be in the house by the middle of summer. She thinks it's probably closer to the end of summer, but either way, you know, July, August, September, they're going to be able to move back into their house. And their neighbors are also, many of their neighbors are also financially able to begin the process. So I think you're right in that aspect of it. You know, Altadena does have the houses that are east of lake tend to be some of the larger homes there with larger lots. And I think those people are moving more aggressively than the homeowners that are west of lake that had maybe traditionally smaller homes on smaller lots and maybe didn't have the financial resources to move as quickly. But it will be interesting to see how it plays out. Any other thoughts that you have before we close up?
Yeah, I actually did look up before our talk today. What I saw as of last report that 1,500 building permits had been issued. That
It's great.
obviously doesn't mean that there's not 1,500 structures up, but 1,500 permits issued, approved, ready to go. I would expect that number to increase drastically as cases resolve and people have the money to rebuild.
Yeah.
So I think what you could take from that is it's a good start, but when you've lost 9 to 10,000 structures, it's clear that more needs to be done, and the rebuilding efforts are going to take a long time.
They are going to take a long time. And, you know, there is that consideration of it, you know, if anyone who's watching this is a developer, in particular a mom and pop developer, and you're thinking of purchasing a lot in the next 6 months or something before the litigation is settled, you know, if it's a really unique, special, high value lot, um, I would say move forward with that. Always move forward cautiously. But if it's a lot that's not that unique, you may want to do some extra due diligence on the value of that, because if you are the first property and you're developing it as a completely speculative thing, you don't intend to move into the property, and you build that house and you're the first one on the block to get billed, you know, it's not nice to say, but I think it's going to be a challenge to sell that lot if all the other lots, that home, that brand new home, if all the other homes around it are waiting to be built. Because if I'm representing a buyer, the buyer is going to say, "Oh, that's a beautiful home, but the 20 houses down the street are not built yet. So for the next year, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, maybe, they're going to be having a lot of construction going on." So,
And a lack of neighborhood. Like
and a
the
lack, a
community
lack
is
of
not there
community,
if you're the only building standing.
right? A lack of community, a lack of neighborhood, and all the rest that go with it. So I think for the speculators, the people that are thinking, I'm going to, go in there and buy cheap and build new homes, and I'm helping the community. Yeah, that's all great, but you better really run your numbers, because the people that you're going to be competing with are the people that are, like we've been talking about, the homeowners that lost their home, and to them it's a much more emotional connection to the land, to the memories that were there, and they're okay with, moving into their home that's a brand new home, knowing that their neighbors are planning, because Altadena is a very tight community. They have very robust networking that goes on among the homeowners. So I think a lot of those people are going to be the ones who are going to establish, like I said with my client, they're, potentially moving in by the end of summer, but they're not the only one on their street. There's probably 3 or 4 other homes that are being built right now.
Yep.
And it's not a long, busy street as well. So it won't seem as onerous as some of the other properties that maybe are kind of in the middle of I don't want to use the word wasteland, because these are all people's homes, but it is a devastating site to go through. If you've had spent any time up there, I'm sure you have, driving through some of the neighborhoods, it is, one of the more catastrophic sites I've ever seen up
There's
close.
square blocks that are entirely leveled with
Yeah,
nothing but dirt on
it's
them
just,
now. And now
you
that the
know,
Army Corps of Engineers took away everything else, there's just dirt lots.
yeah, it's hard to convey to people that don't know the area and that have not seen it up close, but it is, I guess the only thing I can compare it to is kind of the devastation that happened in the lower Ninth Ward in Katrina. And I didn't see that personally, but I saw enough of the footage and some of the films that came out after that. Whole neighborhoods were just leveled and gone. But I think this is an interesting, conversation and information that you've shared with people. If they want to reach out to you, if they have questions, I'm sure most of the people that you've talked to, that you communicate with already, are represented. But if they have other questions or they have other issues they want to discuss, how can they reach you?
Yeah, so my email is chris@foxlawapc.com. And because this is recorded, I just changed my name to pop it in there so visually they could see it as well.
Okay,
But
perfect.
yeah, feel free to reach out with any questions. If you yourself will want to go over this, as we approach trial in say 5 to 6 months, happy to hop back on and give everyone an update then as well.
Yeah, I would love that. And if people want to reach me, they can call or text me at 310-920-1108. And I'd be happy to talk to you about my thoughts about the market. One of the things that I've advised people, again, is because the permitting process that they're trying to make more streamlined is fairly streamlined if you're building on the same footprint plus 200 square feet or 10%, whatever is greater. You get that automatic kind of ministerial approval of your permits. if you're trying to take a 1,200 square foot house that you lost and turn it into a 3,000 square foot house, the permitting process is going to take a little bit longer. You're going to have more paperwork. You're going to have more engineering and architectural plans that are going to be required. So you may want to prepare for that. And, if you need resources, if you need an architect or other advice, reach out to me, or I'm sure Chris has a network of professionals that he could also recommend people to. So
Yep.
thank you
And we
so
are
much.
seeing some people get those permits approved for significantly larger homes. I think a lot of people do want to expand their footprint,
Sure.
but you're right. It's a little bit less of a rubber stamp and it's more of a deep dive, but I
Yeah.
still think people would want to be further along than they are, and that's fully acknowledged. But I think they are doing their best to streamline here and get these permits out the door.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're helping so many people, and I wish them all the best, and I hope that the people on the opposite side of the table that you're talking to are, not just, this mindless firms that are, or that are representing a big corporation, but are actually human beings that understand that these are real people. And at the end of the day, there is, in my opinion, no question about liability. And it's just a matter of let's get the numbers settled for people so that they can move forward.
Yeah, and thanks so much for having me on here. And thanks for all you do for the community as well. I know you've been helping a number of fire victims in the real estate area, and
Sure.
everything helps, and they need help from lots of professionals like you and me as well.
All right. Well, thank you again, Chris. Let me close this out.
Thanks, Will.